This is Bitey Max 22. I'm going to be taking you through a quick tutorial on how to put a lightning ball in an Atlas Stone. If you looked at my intro, you saw me breaking up a stone, and you might guess that I tried it the first time and messed it up really, really bad. I was able to salvage the ball and try again and went through a process that worked, so I'm going to walk you guys through that right now.
And as you can see, I have a really beat up lightning ball for a Atlas Stone. Why is it so beat up? Well, I tried to put screws and stuff in it the first time and they all crushed. I was able to smash up the old stone and save the insert, so I still haven't. I'm trying a different technique. Now you'll notice I have 3 planes here and 2 different rods. So I took a piece of threaded rod, I cut it 17.5 inches to go into the mold and set it in with a nut and washer on each side, so it's equal side and it'll sit in the center. And I took 2 pieces of bare steel, they're the same length. I drove them through and I put them in the middle. So we are going to see if this works. So I'm going to get to pouring in another probably a couple days. I'll be able to tell whether or not it's screwed up. You can see I have a little bit in the bottom and I now have the ball in, suspended. It doesn't seem to be pushing up yet, but I haven't put that much in. I'm going to put a little bit more around it, and I'm going to put the top on before it pushes up too hard. One thing too about setting the concrete and tamping it down, Steve Slater does recommend using a rubber mallet. I tried that. I also tried one of the percussion massagers with a soft bit. Didn't work great. What I have found best is really just whacking it with your fists a little bit, and you can do both sides at the same time. All right, taping. Pretty easy. I do 10 pieces of tape. You'll see that there's little rivets in here, so I put 1 in between every one of those rivets and then 3 around the whole ring. The one thing that's most important from this is you're going to want to start from the top and pull it down so you're pulling it tight. But as you can see right now, I have everything put together, taped together, and it's just fill it and hope this insert doesn't float up. Status update, couple things. I put some tape around the top to make dumping it easier. The other one you see is that so far that foam ball is still in place. You can tell it has a little bit of concrete on it. One quick note, as you dump in, it's a bigger ball. You probably will have to reach your hands in there and push it apart. But if you make this to Steve Slater's recommendation of 5 quarts or 1.25 gallons of water per bag, it's pretty watery and it's not that bad to do. All right, as you can see, everything is done right now. You can see the concrete right on top of there. I clean everything as I go. My shovels, my buckets, the mold, everything. It's easier to keep clean than it is to get clean later. So just a little fast fact there. The insert did not appear to float up to the top. The proof will be in the put-in tomorrow when I come out here to see if it's actually risen. And last time I could see all the top rocks and stuff sticking out the top. So if we have that again, I know it messed up, but I think I'm good this time. Okay, so it's the next day after pouring my stone, and I said that the big test would be to see if I see things sticking out this top portion here. The first time I did it and I screwed up the insert, the way I could tell is I had rocks and everything, the whole 9 yards. You could see it right on the top. So I came out this morning, and not only was it actually nothing sticking out the top, but it was a little low, so I had to add a bit to it. So what I did was I mixed up some concrete patch, which worked out because I have another stone that I was in the process of patching anyways. Did it a little bit watery so it self-leveled, mixed it up. It only took a tiny bit, re-poured it in the top, shook everything out so it leveled up, and this stone should turn out okay. We're going to find out in about 4 days when I open up the top. And just for reference, the concrete patch I use, so you guys see it here, Quickcrete concrete patcher. I believe if you go to State Slater's Hardware, this is what they sell and what they recommend to do this. The stone's now been in the mold about 4 days. I'm ready to pull it out of the mold. Just because it's out of the mold does not mean I'm going to use it. I'm probably going to give it a good other 2 weeks to cure, but it doesn't need to stay in there the entire time. So as I talked before, I have 3 pieces of tape around the ring and then the 10 that are going down from top to bottom in the stripe. I'm going to start by pulling the 3 off the ring and then pull the tape is off. The next step is going to be to separate the top part of the mold using this handy little wooden wedge that's provided to you by Slater's. I would give you a couple tips here. You'll notice I have it sitting on a bucket. I would take the top half off when it is still on the bucket by simply just hammering up underneath like this slowly. Put your hands around the side of the ball and slowly lower it and tip it onto the ground in front of you, and then take off the lower half. Once you do that, you could roll the stone in place to where it's going to sit for the next couple weeks while it cures. There's good news and bad news here. I took the top of the mold off, and as you can see, the top portion does not look great. So what had happened is after pouring it a day later, I came in and noticed that this top portion had sunk quite a bit down, and there's a bit of space here. So I tried to fill it with patch. This looks worse than it is. It is fixable, so you have really two options. You could try and sand down all of this patch, or you could try and patch it back up and fill the mold up. I think I'm going to do a combination of the both. Clean up some of these sides you see here, put the mold back on, and fill this section back up with concrete. Now, one thing that I did want to point out, and the good news is we talked about putting the lightning ball in. And as you notice, there is nothing sticking out of this indicating that the ball floated to the top. I have one little piece of this threaded rod right here that I could see, and it's visible. I will probably actually just grind that down and patch over it. Give everything a very quick sanding using this concrete sanding stone, which is basically just a coarse stone that you use to grind off anything bad on it. You'll notice it looks a lot better already, but there's still this divot in the top I got to fill in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to patch it over. I wet the stone already, you notice that. I am going to put what I need to fill it in on top. Take the top of the mold you can see sitting over there, put it on, and then squeeze it down so all this goes into place. I am sure when we're done doing that, I'm going to give it a good couple more days to dry, if not more than that. I'm going to have to sand some things down, but it should look a lot better. And you notice that even though this is only a couple minutes later after sanding down all the edges, the stone already is starting to look more like a stone, except for just that top. You can see everything right now is back in the mold. I have a few more pieces of tape around it. I'm gonna just go over what I did with you guys. So this area around here didn't seem like it had filled in right. So what I did was I mixed up a bunch of patch and I put it in the areas that needed to be filled. Cleaned out the top of the mold again, so it was perfectly spotless on the inside, it's not on the outside. Re-siliconed it, put it on, and not only twisted it back and forth a bunch of times to make sure that all the concrete went and rounded and went with the shape of the mold, but then I took my mallet and I re-hit it and re-shook everything in with both the rubber mallet and the fist. Now I should note I have this stone over here which I'm in the process of finishing patching. Not a whole lot needed to be done to this. It came out, I didn't have the issues on the top. The big difference is when I poured this one, I noticed that the top portion had sunk down here about an hour after pouring, and I refilled it. When I did this one and you saw I had the issues on the top, I waited about a day and noticed it had sunk down, then tried to re-pour it. So I would make the suggestion to everybody after you pour your molds, come back in about an hour to 2 hours, and if everything seems to have dropped down on the top and you'll visibly be able to see it, I would fill it then. I would not try and wait a day like I did with this one. But I'm gonna give this a few more days in the mold. It's Sunday now, we'll probably pull it out on Wednesday or Thursday and see how it looks. I'm expecting it's at least good enough where I could get it back to full form without doing much more than minor patching afterwards. All right, it is 4 days later. I'm about to take the top off of where I patched it. I am hoping it's gonna look very much like this stone, which is a solid core stone. It should weigh about 240. This one is the one with the insert, should weigh about 200 pounds when I'm done. I am expecting when I open up the top that I probably am going to have some finishing to do, some light sanding, stuff like that, but it should look much better than it did the other day. We're going to find out in a second. We have the mold unbroke, and now I am going to do the unveiling with you guys. So you're going to find out in real time if I mess this up or not. And I need a little bit of sanding, but this looks 100 times better than it does the other day. So I'm going to go get my sander. I'm going to show you what I used on the other stone, which worked really well. Two different things, one for the bigger edges and one for some of the smaller, grittier stuff. These are the two things I use to sand the stone. This is 150 grit wall sanding paper. This is what they use when they're actually sanding your walls after they sheetrock them. They'll put one of these on the end of a pole, go up and down and make it nice and flat like these walls in my beautiful kitchen. And this is a masonry pumice stone. You can find this in the masonry section of most of your hardware stores is very hard, very abrasive. I'm going to use this for the big edges and this for the finer stuff to flatten it out. All right, update. Sanded some stuff down, took the stone out of the mold. So what you're looking at now is the bottom portion. You can tell it's a little bit different of a color from having sat in the mold a little longer. I do have some pock marks, buggables, whatever you want to call them. I'm gonna just grab some patch and cover over it, much like I did this one, which needs to be sanded down. It should look like that when I'm done. But I am where I should be, so it looks like the fix worked. Just a little bit of sanding and putting some patch on it, and this should be a good working stone in a couple weeks. One thing I did want to show you guys, if I could find it, which is, you're noticing I had the ball in there, and we're having a very hard time finding anything indicating that. I do have this one nub right in there. You guys could probably see, it might be a little hard. Trying again. That is a little piece of the threaded rod that stuck out. So all I did to get that down is I took an angle grinder, you can see it right there, ground it down a little bit, and I'm just going to fill it over with patch. I may not have even needed to do that. I just really rather not grab my arm or my hand or something on a piece of metal when I'm trying to do a stone and cut it off. As I said, I was going to put some patch on this to make everything round and fix it out and then sand it. You can see I've done that now. I used the same patch I used as the filler, the same patch that is recommended on the Slater's Hardware website. All I did was filled in the holes. I did it thin. You're going to want to mix the patch a little thicker to do this. Sanded everything down with the sanding paper I showed you earlier that's used for drywall and taping. Wet it down a little bit afterwards. What will happen is the dust will actually get wet and harden in some of the cracks too. And this really just needs to dry for a few more days. I'll probably do one more quick sanding and wipe down, and then I will seal it, and that should be it. So I'm not going to go through all those steps for you guys. They're a little tedious, they're a little boring, and I'm going to end it there. But as you can see right there, I had a ball that looked terrible about 5 days ago. I was able to fix up, and in 1 to 2 weeks it should be usable. And for reference, here is a solid core that I did not mess up as bad. As you can see, it looks a lot better, and I didn't have to do those patching. This one should weigh 240. This one should weigh about 200 with the lightning.
Now that you've seen the video, I'm going to walk you through the couple of the lessons learned that I went through when making this. First one is when doing the lightning ball. The first time I tried it, what I did is I put a bunch of screws all the way around the whole thing. When I put that in and I started filling it with concrete, it raised, and it wound up crushing the screws. I actually had to pull them out of the lightning ball. So the first suggestion would be with the lightning ball is anything you put in there, have at least 1 or 2 items that go all the way through. So I had the rods, I used 3 of them. All of those rods went all the way through the ball. They were 17.5 inches long. For the threaded one, you could take a drill, put the rod into the drill and spin it right in. It's the easiest way to put it in without getting the ball messed up. The other 2 were bare rods. I drove them in with hammers. When you do that, you want to just make sure that there's equal distance on each end. That will keep everything in place. The second lessons learned is obviously there was a mess up there with pouring the top of the ball. The first time I poured a ball, I came back about a half hour, hour later, and you could see the concrete will actually settle down a little bit. You want to make sure you refill this when everything is wet, not when it dries and you're putting things on top. That's where I messed up with this ball. I was lucky I was able to salvage it, but it wound up taking a couple of days of extra work and some extra sanding, and I'll probably always be able to see a little bit of where that line is, but it'll work fine. I'll be able to use it. So with that being said, you guys could reach out to me through the YouTube comment sections with any questions you have. It's a pretty simple process. I didn't go over things like how to mix concrete and what concrete to use because they're covered in every other video you guys are going to pull up. But I didn't find any with the lightning ball, which is why I want to do this. So thank you guys. If you enjoyed this, I hope it helps you make a ton of Atlas stones and you guys all get big and strong using them. Thank you.